Good morning from Vietnam, everybody. My name is Joshua from Vietnam, and we've got a lot to talk about today. So go ahead and fill your cup with whatever bitter brew you're drinking, and let's get started. Today is our ninth episode, and I have no co host. I'm all alone. My normal co host, Sash, had to pick up an extra shift today at work, so it's just me. But I want to talk about A New Age is the title of today's episode. And what we're going to be looking at today is this conjunction that's coming on December 21st. So we're going to have what's called a double planet. And a double planet happens every once in a while. They're recorded in history, but with the current theories of cosmology being so different throughout time and the fact that this only happens once or twice a millennia, things like the great star that predicted the birth of Christ was likely a double or maybe even a triple planet, depending on what astrologer you talk to. But basically, it's when two planets get so close that with the naked eye, they're no longer differentiable. So you can't tell the difference between the two. And on December 21st, which you guys might know as the winter equinox, that's when the sun reaches its southernmost point in our sky and changes its trajectory and begins to head north once again. So, people in the southern hemisphere, my friends in Australia, are having their warmest time right now. How coincidental the news is touting how low their flu virus rate is at the moment. Well, it's the middle of summer. Not many people get the flu in the middle of summer now, do they? So Australia is having their summer, and on the December 21st, it's going to change, and the sun will go the opposite direction. And astrologers across the world are saying that this is the signal of a new age. This one specifically, not like every year, though this does happen every year. They're talking about 2020, the way things are aligned, the way that the stars are aligned, a new age is going to begin. And this is one of the reasons. So Jupiter and Saturn are going to be right by Aquarius in our sky. Now, the age of Aquarius carries a lot of lore with it in these current days. There are people who say we're in it, there are people who say we're going to it next. And nobody's really clear what it means, but a lot of New World Ordery type things often talk about the age of Aquarius. That being the age where Christ returns, was predicted by one pastor, I'm not quite sure how long ago, and the age that the beast, the government, is finally assembled and we'll see the rise of Rome again. But this is happening, and between December 21st to December 27th, we're going to see this crazy, crazy sight, this bright thing in our sky. I'm going to try to get a little bit far out of Saigon to see it. It would be quite an event. I probably could even see it with the light pollution that is in Saigon. Amazingly enough, with how bright it is, I've seen Jupiter before. So if Saturn and Jupiter are lining up together, it should be viewable. I have a P900 camera, which has a massive optical zoom lens on it, and I can take some wonderful astrophotography pictures. So it will be my goal to get far out and to see this. I've shown my moon photos, I think, before on stream, and they're quite beautiful. So I really do think that something happened um, in the fall of 2001 that just changed everything about the course of of our our life in the United States. And because we're in such a globalized world, that rippled through the world and changed the life of everyone completely. And that was an age like the 90s were different in a lot of ways, even spiritually, like just the the movement of spirits was different. But we're in spiritual warfare, and things do shift. And 2001 was beginning of something, and I feel like that's ending now. And December 21st is going to be the start of, well, it's going to be the start of what's next. And it's pretty interesting. We're seeing riots all over the world right now, like absolutely everywhere. So in India, this is the mainstream perspective. My green screen's having some couple troubles today. I'm a little blurry, but this is the mainstream perspective. This is it's a blue check mark on Twitter. What do you want? It's the globalist hired reporter inside, or journalist inside of India, and he's reporting on these riots. So let's go through this now. And he says last week the largest organized strike in human history shut down India. 250 million people struck out against Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi neoliberal reforms to the agriculture sector. Now, I know not everyone's super caught up on Indian politics, so we'll talk about what those reforms are in a minute, but let's continue on with Mr. Blue Checkmark. These reforms don't just remove the collective bargaining and price controls that protect the agricultural sector, which employs more than half the Indian working population, but also stripped multinational corporations and government of liability for harms to their workers. All this while unemployment is at 27% and 76% of rural Indians lack the funds to cover their basic nutritional needs. Meanwhile, Indian billionaires have increased their wealth by 35% during the pandemic. India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani, has made $12 million per hour since March. The strike didn't just turn out unemployed people and farmers. The turnout was driven by acts of solidarity from every sector of society. In his discussion with Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! And PSAneth.org, offers some really important political context. Modi has had a comfortable congressional majority for 2 years and has 3 years left to go in his mandate. So why did he wait for the pandemic to make this far-reaching power grab? We'll talk about what that power grab is. The reasoning was these blokes are on their knees now. They can't organize, they can't hit back, and in fact, many leading neoliberal intellectual economists and journalist editors incited the government, saying never waste a good crisis. It's a shock doctrine shit, in other words, but Modi badly misjudged the moment. Rather than being betrayed or being beyond resistance, Indians have been beaten to the sticking point and will no longer be fooled by religious bigotry and neoliberal fairy tales. They're calling Modi a neoliberal. Right-wing movements around the world are grounded in the idea that some people are born to rule and the rest of us are born to be ruled over. Anti-majoritarian philosophy isn't compatible with democracy because it requires sustained turkeys voting for Christmas to survive. As India shows, the traditional tools of anti-majorityism, xenophobia, sectarianism, armed violence are unstable in the long run. Eventually, there comes a point where you can't just shout, "Muslims are scary," at starving people and expect them to take that for an answer. Indians have been slaughtered by both COVID and mismanagement. They are at the breaking point. They are rising up. So you can see the globalist ilk all over this, where he constantly says how Modi's far-reaching power grab is hurting Indians during this crisis. But what exactly is the reform that Modi's trying to pass? Remember, the man's a nationalist, right? He's an India first type guy. Excuse me. So another perspective. The long thread on the farmers' protests and agricultural reforms. What are these protests all about? Now, keep in mind, all these protests are located in a single region in India. They're up in Punjab, and that's only happening in one place, and you're about to see why. So, why are the protests concentrated in Punjab and Haryana? Are these really farmers or traders losing grip on monopoly? Are farmers being misled? Let numbers do the talking. Here we go. So he's going to start with this picture, and basically his only point is he's going to isolate just one crop to talk about. He's going to talk about wheat, and you can see that I'm not exactly sure. I think this is 94. I don't know what the 94 represents. Maybe $94 billion worth of wheat. Compared to like sugarcane, which is the majority, vegetables are a little bit more, rice is about the same. And so A top-down view of Indian production is in order here. What are India's agricultural produce a year? The chart is for the financial year of 2015, and to understand the complexity, we'll have to work with one crop, and we're going to work with wheat. So you can see it's one of their top 5 biggest. In 2020, India is looking at 105 million tons of wheat produce versus 94 million tons in 2015. What does this growth look like? See below for the year of growth of wheat in India. 105 million tons in 2020 will bust the chart below. Forget naysayers. Indian agriculture is doing great production. So, and then he's got a chart here just showing that every year India is making more wheat every single year very consistently. So something is working well when production goes up consistently. However, supply is great. Demand is not growing as much. Look at the wheat consumption in India. As you can see, the demand is consistently below supply by about 10 million tons. Who needs this extra 10% of wheat? Not Indians. So, chart proving his point that the consumption of wheat in India is below how much they produce. They need to either export it or throw it away. So what do? Can we export it? Well, it's unlikely. This is where it gets complicated. The United States Department of Agriculture report on agriculture, the EU, China, and India accounted for a little over 50% of the world's wheat production, about 762 million tons in 2008 and 19. However, we hardly export any wheat. India doesn't even feature as a wheat exporter in this chart. India is expected to be a marginal net wheat exporter during the projection period. This implies that India is a price taker in wheat trade. We can't set the price internationally, right? Because they're not exporting substantial. They basically just use their own wheat. They have 10% growth. They export that. It's just not worth very much money right now. So there's no money to be made in it. So they don't export it. Even if we want to export, there is a major problem. Growth in the wheat import is concentrated in developing countries. Most developed nations with better purchasing are wheat surplus. Globally, the consumption of wheat is falling below the production, and as we see in the below graphic, like just the world makes too much wheat. And government subsidies, like it's the same thing in the United States. We make way too much corn. We make way too much soy. They're all owned by government subsidies. That's why if you go down a snack aisle in America, everything is soy product or corn product because people get paid to use it practically. It's just not needed. And wheat's reaching those levels. Like there's starving people all over the country, but we have too much wheat. So the globalist dream, right? Have too much wheat, the government buys it all, and people starve. So most developed nations don't need to purchase wheat. It's pretty much only third world countries that are importing wheat. Since developed nations have surplus, major wheat importers will be African nations. Hardly lucrative markets. It keeps the wheat prices depressed, closing the exports door for us. See the international prices of wheat and how they are relatively at about $200 per ton. And you can see this is a 5-year chart that he's showing. And it goes up to 230 in some peaks and goes down to 140 in others. So this is about 1,400 Indian rupees per quintal versus the MSP. And we'll talk about what the MSP is because this is a mandated price that Indians must sell wheat at in certain areas, which is 1975. So the global market is cheaper than Indian government mandates that Modi wants to remove. So the MSP is a good 40% above the international prices. No exports can happen at this rate. The MSP appears to be the root of current agitation. Farmers ask for a minimum price guarantee so he can predict his income, right? So that's the spin that they're putting on it. Like the poor farmers, you need to protect the poor farmers, right? Like, because they want these minimum prices for all these goods. They don't want them to be influenced by the commodity market because they want to overproduce and have someone buy it. If all produce is bought at MSP, farmers can look at increasing production and rising income. Sounds good. Except that someone has to pay for the wheat, which we don't need. Because if government procures excess wheat, this is what happens. See the average stocks of the financial indicator for wheat and rice, the Food Corporation of India for wheat and rice. You can see that their stocks are just going up because when there's too much wheat and nobody will buy it at the price because there's a mandated market price, then the government has to go in and buy all the farmers' wheat at the mandated market price and just spend money arbitrarily, like, right, for no real good reason. So this stock is approximately 3 years of production. It's absurd holding levels. At this sudden spike in MSP rates in the last 5 years, we're looking at substantial deficits for the Food Corporation of India. How much deficit? Well, 2.5 rupees. I don't understand that measurement. And look at the pace that it's growing over the past 5 years. So this is the mandated price going up. And this next chart, I'll skip a bit. So this is, why are the protests concentrated in Punjab and Haryana? I tried to explore the money trail. The graphic below indicates the percent of wheat bought through MSP in each state. And you see that Punjab and Haryana are very high percentages, like 73% of the wheat was purchased at that MSP price versus 80%, and 80% in Haryana. And then you look at the other ones, like there's one that's at 0, Bihar's at 0. Most of India is at 33.7. Rajasthan is at 14.6, and Uttar Pradesh is at 11.3. So the farmers that are angry are obviously the farmers that have been enjoying this market price that Modi's trying to remove, because like Indians can't even buy Indian wheat because what are they gonna do? So what's going on the other side of this is wheat's getting bought very cheap in the rest of India and then being smuggled into Punjab and Haryana because they're then saying that it's Punjabi wheat. They're saying that it's Punjabi wheat so that the government would have to procure any of that excess wheat at the MSP prices. And Modi's trying to break down these prices. And this Mint article, I think it's a bit long, so I'll probably skip it. But instead, we'll listen to this guy who talks about what's going on. He speaks in English, but with a thick Indian accent. So let's go ahead.
And every single scheme he ever comes
Sorry
up
about
with.
that.
And two, the age-old battle of communism. The anti-farm bill protests are anti-farmer. They are the manifestation of two narratives. One, hatred for Modi and every single scheme he ever comes up with. And two, the age-old battle of communism with capitalism. The battle of delivering a choice versus dictating a command. On one, one just hopes Modi doesn't wake up one fine day and recommend breathing in of clean air, or these dunderheads will pick up axes in their thousands and begin chopping trees. The mind boggles. These reforms are not about PDS or MSP. Stop it. No government in history has provided better MSP than the Modi government. As he just pointed out this evening, UPA bought 1.5 lakh metric ton pulses at MSP. NDA in the same span, 2014 to 19, purchased 76 lakh metric ton at MSP. For oilseeds, UPA 3.6 LMT, NDA 30. Neither are these reforms about forcing farmers away from selling their produce through the existing corrupt system of bicholiyas and sarkari crime counters. Go right ahead and continue if you wish. It is about giving a man a choice. These are reforms promised and advocated by the Congress, and yet again Modi is fulfilling them and taking the brunt, ironically from Congress and its gamcha-wearing champagne socialist lapdogs. They want to have a choice provided to them on everything, from phones to cars to tractors they are driving in to block the highways, but they don't want the poor farmer, exploited since time immemorial by the middlemen and touts and the government, to have a choice on who to sell his produce or who to undertake contract farming with. Did you know MSPs are now transferred by DBT, except in Punjab, where they go through the middlemen? दलालों को बचाते बचाते खुद दलाल बन गए और किसानों की जिंदगियां तबाह कर दी. But that's what socialism and communism are, Navika. Their single aim is to restrict or remove choices, to force people to follow an anti-Darwinian junk system that has only ever led to death, destruction and misery. Navika, For just 5 years in our 70 years independent history, we junked socialism. Who did it? The Congress under P.V. Narasimha Rao. The 1991 reforms were all about providing a choice. Ambassador or Toyota, Bajaj or Honda, Doordarshan or Times Now. And we took it with open arms. Imagine if Twitter was available back then, all these Kongi and Qawmi Chauthi fails would have been trolling Rao. But the truth is, you cannot wake a person pretending to be asleep. There is a reason why the communist symbol is what it is. They want you to keep using those tools. But Indian farmers reject your archaic ideas and reject your archaic tools.
That guy is straight up 100% absolutely crushing. So you can see that his point is Modi, it's the exact same agenda that's going on with Trump, except it's in India, right? Like Modi's really trying to open up the market. He's trying to stop all this corruption that's going on with these trucks getting pulled over with hundreds tons of wheat that's from other sources being bought at like really reduced prices because they don't have the infrastructure to enforce the MSPs in the rural areas, right? And then it's being shuffled in. So yeah, there are some farmers that have been living off the government's welfare that are going to see reduced welfare. But it's also about the fact that if we're overproducing wheat, we need to do other things, right? The innovation needs to come through. It's the same way in America. We need to stop producing corn. We need to stop producing soy. We need to end these ridiculous subsidies. So this guy, like I said, is really, really crushing. We've had a really interesting week in the past, since we've been looking at it last, because we were talking about what the Dow was doing and everything was going crazy. And gold, I mean, I know gold bugs are getting excited because we did see a pretty substantial increase over the past week, but we're just beginning to flex and we're going into the holidays. And remember, gold always rises in the holidays, so I don't think this is a market indicator of anything except for the fact that the new year, the Lunar New Year specifically, is coming on February 12th. So we can see that the Dow stayed flat pretty much the whole week, nothing of interest, which is really curious to me because we wonder who really encouraged that Dow Jones spike that did happen right after Biden was put as the nominee, right, by Wall Street, or not by Wall Street, sorry, by Washington Post, I guess, is who inaugurated him. But Trump does have a path still to victory. So the Pennsylvania election lawsuit, remember what we were talking about back when I did my last solo podcast, where Trump only needs 2 of all these corrupted states to just say, wait a second, we're not sending the electors that the ballots reveal because they're not under any obligation to do so. Americans don't vote for the president. They vote for some imaginary thing created by law, and then they pick people to then go to Washington, D.C. to then vote. And then you sometimes have laws that make them vote the way that you want them to vote based on the imaginary ballots that were cast. And sometimes there aren't. So that's what the faithless electors were when sometimes in some states they'll refuse to vote for who their state went with. And I know in Reagan's time there was a bunch. I think a bunch of faithless electors went to Reagan the time before he was elected, interestingly enough. So, sorry about the buzzing. Fixed now. So the Pennsylvania is one of the bigger points when we look at the Electoral College. And remember, you only need to get Biden to go below 270. And then if no one can win, it goes to Congress, and specifically the House of Representatives. But it's not about how many seats are the House of Representative members. It's weirdly enough, only one state gets to send a vote. So it's how many states have the majority of a party. And right now the Republicans win that with 26 states to 23. And then I think one is split 50-50. So if it goes to the House of Representatives, Trump's likely to win. The electors from Pennsylvania are beginning to have their case built that they will be dismissed. Pennsylvania election lawsuit has been officially docketed at the U.S. Supreme Court. Justice Alito has ordered the state to respond no later than December 9th. This is from Josh Barnett, who has been running for Congress in Arizona. I do believe the ballots showed that he lost, and I think he's contesting. I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever in that, but I haven't looked either, so I'm not saying he's not valid. But so let's take a look at that. Is this even true? Like, this is some crazy, crazy stuff. The Supreme Court needs to accept the case, so to have something docketed is pretty substantial, but this isn't a case yet. So this is just a petition. So Mike Kelly filed, he's a legislator in Pennsylvania, I believe. He filed this trying to stop the electors. He filed a petition, an emergency petition to Justice Alito to stop the electors from Pennsylvania as being considered valid. And now the reason why I went to Justice Alito is because we have 9 members on the Supreme Court, and every member of the Supreme Court gets a geographic region called a circuit. That is their circuit. They get a geographic region where if emergency petitions to the Supreme Court come up, they can act alone in the emergency to get it time to get and begin the proceedings so that it can then be taken on by the Supreme Court. Justice Alito is a conservative, and I don't think it's a coincidence that all the contested states right now are in conservative judges' districts, specifically Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh. Remember, both of them did work as lawyers for George W. Bush in the case of Bush v. Gore, in which overturned and the Supreme Court on December 12th, mind you, on December 12th, overturned the election from Gore and then gave it to Bush. So it's quite an interesting prospect. And now we have this petition, and what Justice Alito said, because what Mike Kelly's saying is like, look, I've got all this evidence of the Dominion voting systems, right? All these voting systems are fraud, whatever. I've got all this evidence, and it's just, you got to throw out the whole thing and let Pennsylvania legislature vote for the electors. And Justice Alito said, well, what does the Board of Elections say? So he gave the Board of Elections till December 9th to respond to him. So it doesn't mean we're going to have any like clear answers anytime soon. Like, the nature of their game is the nature of their game. They're trying to build anxiety, and that's the real reason of why it just doesn't matter, because it's about this division and it's about this contention. If Trump wins, there's going to be a lot of trouble in the United States, and if Biden wins, there's going to be a lot of trouble in the United States. And you can argue that Trump is a champion of the culture war, but he's also accelerating it. And so you need to think about an accelerationist point of view about, is it like, do you steer into the turn, right? Do you lean into the punch? Because things are coming, things are going to get bad. Cities in the United States are going to get really, really dark. I mean, it's not like we're not already there. If I can find the next article that I had queued here, it's about Los Angeles, and the fact that you're gonna laugh, but it's 33 million. 33 million people are now locked down in California, where bars are getting shut, and all this. And let's switch over here. So 33 million Californians face COVID tests. New stay-at-home order will be imposed as the coronavirus spirals out of control. Interesting. 33 Californians will be subject to the new order. And if you go to this new order, it just links you to an LA Times article that's pretty much word for word, but it'll block me because my ad blocker. So this is 84% of the state's population. This is absolutely absurd. This is the death of the American small business, and Trump didn't save us. He didn't even help us fight. He gave us good TV clips, but like he was still out there every day holding press conferences like this was a big deal. And I mean, I've shown you the CDC numbers before, but Americans are not dying in mass this year. We don't have more deaths in all of America from all causes this year than we do in other years. And that's a real reality of it. That's according to the CDC. And that's such a emphasis that can't be overlooked, because Trump didn't stick up for us. Like the very first episode of this podcast was how Trump lost my vote, and we found that, or we looked at the economy in 2020, and that the death of the dollar is inevitable. And I know people have been saying that for 20 years, but oh my gosh, they're holding it together with duct tape and bubble gum. 2008 was almost the end of it, but it just barely wasn't. And now we're I lost my train of thought. Give me a moment. And so we were talking about how in 2020 everything got worse. Our velocity went down, which makes us vulnerable to a mass velocity spike, and a mass velocity spike would trigger hyperinflation. And our monetary stores went up, and then we just printed money like there was no tomorrow, and our debt keeps ticking every day. So we're killing the small businesses, and we're making this world like where, okay, the only place to work is freaking Walmart and Aldi's warehouse, and you can work at McDonald's, but the restaurants that serve you real good food, and not even that there's that many, but the restaurants that serve you decent, healthy food is shut down, but you can go to McDonald's no problem. I support your decision. There, you are an essential worker, McDonald's employee, but I'm sorry, dear waitress, go home. You are not wanted. You're not welcome. And California's economy is nearly the size of the EU's, to put that in perspective, right? So if California's economy is crippled, America's economy is crippled. They are such a massive part, and all this small business will be felt. And they're shutting down in mass, and it's not good. And we need to keep our bellies full, and we need to keep our families safe, and we need to keep our eyes open for what's going on here, because India's lucky that they're producing so much wheat, because we're going to need stores of it when the money stops and the demand drops. Like, what's going to happen? All the agricultural workers are going to get laid off because stocks are going to start going unsold, and then the land will just stop producing because it's not profitable. And you're like, oh, well, the government will buy it up and distribute it. Well, how's the government going to get the money to do that? They're going to print it, and then that's going to trigger inflation, right? And once the inflation starts, just like in Germany, like it's a really slippery slope, because in Keynesian economies like ours, it's about the mentality of the market. It's about how it feels. It's not about real supply or real demand. It's just about what people think will be demanded more tomorrow than is today, and what people think they can use to get one up. So this is real. This is from the Supreme Court. It really is ordered. And then we see the markets freeze last week. We see Joe Biden in a foot boot. It happened last week. I knew about it. I wanted to bring it up, but I think I just forgot towards the end. So like Joe Biden was, oh my goodness. It's so disturbing. The official mainstream story that the Joe Biden organization released is so disturbing. Joe Biden just got out of the shower, and went to pull his dog's tail. Joe Biden just gets out of the shower and goes to pull his dog's tail, breaks a hair, or puts a hairline fracture in his foot, and now he's in a boot. And right, the Q-tards are so much on this level where like ankle boots mean prison trekking ankle bracelets. Like, which is hilarious to me because, like, Hillary Clinton was in a boot for a while, and they're like, we've got her, folks. Lock her up. We've got her stock, lock, and key, right? And what happened to her? I mean, I guess she's not in politics, so you can argue she worked out a deal where she just has to live on house arrest. But it's so silly. It's so silly. And sure enough, after I saw that about 2 or 3 days later on Twitter, nonstop, like the Q-tards were in full force. It's weird that there's so many of them, especially when like there's supposed to be mass bannings. Like apparently anyone with Q in their description was supposed to get banned, but they're still all over. So that seems like that was more of a political stunt to me, which goes back to the fact that, guys, this Trump v. Biden thing. It doesn't matter. There's not a difference between the two. These guys are serving the same master, and their goal is not about nationalism. Their goal is not about globalism. Their goal is to maximize anxiety and frustration because we are in a spiritual war, and these demonic forces feed on that hate, on that despair, on that anger, on all that. So everything is being carefully designed. And it's the real problem with Trump, and it's what the conservatives, the GOP actually said, which of course, right? Like they always tell you. And they're like, well, he accelerates the problem, he exasperates it. And you're damn right he did. You mean, do you think these riots would be happening in Minneapolis if Hillary Clinton was in office? No. Do we agree with any of her ideas or her ideals? Of course not. But what was it that they were able to use to keep the population so angry that they could incite them into these riots? Read the Bible. Read the Bible, and when it talks specifically about how the Jews in the crowd would make up a reason and just get everyone excited and agitated, and then just all of a sudden a riot would form, right? Like this is a manipulation tactic of the elite since the dawn of time. And it's the same mobs and rioters that they used to get Pilate to kill Jesus. They demanded it to him. It's right there in the scripture, and whether you believe in it or not is besides the point, because we know it's a very old book, and we're seeing the tactic that they're using right now. So Trump now will accelerate the hatred, but so will Biden. I don't even know which one's better at this point, because Biden could create a lot of problems internationally and a lot of people, but America, right? Trump's making problems in America. So we're seeing straightness in the market, almost like it's holding its breath. On December 13th, which is an important date, on December 13th, the electors are supposed to be finally chosen from each state. So all the people who actually do vote for the president will be chosen on by December 12th, and then December 13th, they should go and cast their vote. And then I believe that Congress needs to affirm that vote, which they tend to do on January 6th. These are deadlines set by Constitution. These are when we'll actually know what's going on. I still do think that Trump's going to remain in the White House, because I think they don't want to lose this power to agitate and to anger people. I think it's the same reason that people like Modi are in power. Like, it gives them power to make Indians angry. I don't think that any of these people can be our saviors. And if we look to them to be our saviors, we're going to have some serious, serious problems. And guys, 2020 is crazy. And so let me tell you about France. French rioters are fighting back against police force in multiple videos and literally driving them back. The problem with a French police state is that your police is French, but the resistance, well, it's French. Absolute insanity. This doesn't stop, right? So we have riots in India, we have riots in the US, we have riots in Hong Kong, we have riots in France, we have riots in Iran, we have riots in Poland. Everything and everyone. If you want this power removed from you of what's going on, you need to repent of politics. You need to stay detached. You need to remove the anger and the hatred about who rules these worldly kingdoms. This is what it means to give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. You can't, like I said, we are in a spiritual warfare, and these demonic presences, these demonic beings, these principalities feed on these anger, these hatred, these hopelessness, this anxiety, this depression. And if you want to remove yourself from those feelings, you have to cut your emotional investment off on these things and tie your emotional investment to things that are important. Build families. And if you don't have families by blood, build families by fellowship. Find people in your community that you can be close with, that you can look at, that you can trust, that you can love, that you can know that they'll have your back in these times. Find areas to live with people who think like-minded like you, where you guys can be self-sufficient. I'm here in Vietnam. I'm in a very different world. And so far, even with this whole corona nonsense, we've dodged it all. It's been amazing. It's been a blessing. We've had a few new cases in the past 2 weeks, but I'm pretty sure that the Vietnamese government is going to ensure that the spread stops. Vietnamese elections were supposed to be last month, and they got postponed, so they'll be held in early January, interestingly enough, right when ours will probably actually be decided. And I think that everyone is very, very intent on ensuring that Vietnam doesn't have an outbreak. So our economy is doing very well here, and things are safe, but the world is in just this upheaval, and there are few safe places left, and these aren't hills to die on. None of it. Nothing that anyone's fighting for right now is worth dying for. There's a lot going on in this world, and there's a lot of people that are angry about a lot of things, but Donald Trump is not worth dying for. The GOP, I mean, I think everyone knows by now, Charlie Kirk is not worth dying for. And there certainly are causes and ideals you can throw at me, and I'll agree with you, okay, these are worth dying for, but there's no one fighting on the side of these ideals and these causes. There are organizations, militant organizations, controlled, operative, planned, designed like pawns on a chessboard of how many dimensions you want, that use these ideals and these causes as cloaks. So these people fighting in France are in the Lois Sécurité Globale. It's the new global policy that Macron, am I right on? Yeah, Macron is enforcing, and it's basically like Merkel to the core. It's totally bad news, and everyone wants nothing to do with it in France. And we've seen France volatile for probably 2-3 years now. Like, you remember the yellow vest riots and protests that never really died down or stopped. Like, it's absolute insanity. And here they're going, and so they're testing these things. Like the whole lockdown idea was given a dry run in Italy. You know? Remember? It seems like years ago, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of this year, and now we are at the end, which is crazy. What a flipping year. And we're not just at the end of the year, we're at the end of this era, and I'm not an astrologer, but the people who are say that we are at the end of an age and a new one is coming on December 21st. So the grand finale is now, and the opening act of something brand new. Like I think that 7-Eleven was a part-time job was the opening act of the age that we were in, that the millennials were shaped by, and the Zoomers aren't shaped. And the Zoomers are coming up now, and they're going to be shaped by what's happening by this pandemic, and they're going to be shaped by what's happening in this coming year of 2021, because the indicators on the economy are off the charts. Like, it's going to get bad. It's going to get really, really, really bad. And like, it's not like there's a conservative president option. Like, Donald Trump already showed in 2020 that he's willing to sign any check as long as he gets the credit for it. And Joe Biden is my goodness, he's just as much of a populist as Donald Trump is. And so the reality of that is the fact that the reality of that is that either way, if we start to go into this depression or a recession, it's going to be a depression from the signs of it. The government's going to exasperate the problem by printing money en masse, because that's the only thing that they know how to do. If they can't increase velocity, then they increase supply, and they just give it to people. But as we showed in 2020, where did that money go? It all went to giant corporations, which is insane, because now the small business in America is failing. They really are. There's nothing that they can do to stop it. And these big corporations are going to be the only place to work. And there it is, right? Like, all the 1984 shit, it doesn't even matter what the government says you're allowed to say if there's only a cartel that gives jobs, right? Like, if there's this capitalistic cartel between big tech and, Walmart and McDonald's and all the Fortune 100 companies, right? Because they all have the same liberal woke policies. They now say, if you say this, you're not allowed to work, but there's literally nowhere else to work, because they're shutting it down. They're shutting it all down, and they're not giving ways to start new ones. And people aren't going to use this time where their business fails to try to start a new endeavor. What's going to happen? They're going to take any job they can. And what companies are thriving and succeeding? But these giant corporations. And so they're going to take the jobs in these giant corporations, and Amazon's force is going to get bigger, and the small companies are going to fail. So Amazon's user base is going to grow. So their need for employees. And so it's going to be to the point where these are the only jobs. And it's happening in other sectors too. It's happening in agriculture. It's happening in farming, where these giant corporations are buying up the only fertile land. And it's worrisome. And so what can you do, and how can you exist if you don't have guaranteed employment? The government wouldn't need to mandate the vaccine if every single employer who had a chance of hiring you could mandate it. We're seeing what every liberal communist we've ever talked to has been screaming about and warning everyone about. And we're seeing that the conservatives have just dismissed it on talking points. And I'm not saying that communism is the answer, because it's clearly not. But we're going towards it. Even if it's not government run, it'll be run by these corporations. And so our responsibility is the fact that we need to find a way to stay sustainable through all of this. It's the most important thing, because we're going to need a way to thrive, and that's why communities are so important. You need to be building relationships with people of worth and of value, and you need to be focused on truth above all else, and you need to find people in your circle who are associated and focused and are in love with exactly what truth is. It's very important for our survival as a whole, because these instabilities in these nations is growing. And look at this generation that's growing up, these Zoomers who go online because their parents all give them phones with internet access. Why, parents? Why do you do that? I teach Zoomers, like they're my literal students, and there is no better way to ensure your child has emotional issues than to give your child a phone with internet access unfettered. And most of them do. So their culture is being shaped and twisted by bots on Reddit. And it's pushing things like pornography addictions to boys at the youngest of ages, like 10 and 11, are getting just shoved this down their throat. And it's there on purpose. Twitter, less so for the Zoomers. But what is it? Reddit, Quora, Instagram, where this pornography is getting shut down. TikTok, especially. Like the gateway and the pathway of TikTok to OnlyFans is so heartbreaking, and it's becoming $1 billion industry, because now they've just made a new way for young girls to sell themselves out, and they're 18, 19 years old, and they can't get a job and go be a waitress, and there's nothing else they can do, but they can make tons of money like this, and they can pay for everything, and it's the world enticing them in with these promises of everything, and it's going to leave them empty and broken, and it's heartbreaking. And to be strengthened in these times of spiritual warfare, we need to focus on empathy and love, and not on hatred and anger. And it doesn't matter if that guy is so asleep in his coma of CNN that he voted for Joe Biden. Like, it doesn't make you hate them. Obviously, protect yourself and your family. But part of protecting yourself and your family is protecting your emotional state. And we're going to war. And that's a time to be calm and collected. Empathy and love are needed, because it will spiritually protect you. It will spiritually protect you by not feeding these principalities. You focus on truth. Speak only truth with your words, and you'll have protection. I promise everyone that. There's one more report that I wanted to take a look at, because this just had me cracking up. Because in the beginning of the corona stuff, like, do you remember the first conspiracy theories? Because my memory is that they were all about 5G. Like, they were all about 5G coming in, and like, just, it's roasting our brains. People are gonna be dying left and right, but it's that 5G. It's like they're zapping us. Government zapping us right in our brain, brother. I can tell you right now. And it was everywhere. And it seems silly to me because, yes, of course, you can make people sick with microwaves, and of course, you can hurt people with microwaves, but these engineers that build these transmission devices, right, they have something focused. Like, the engineers can't all be corrupt. It would need to be a much more secretive technology than it is, and there might be something weird about it, because I know there are some patents held by the CIA on 5G, actually, now that I'm saying it aloud and remembering that. But anyway, this is a report from Cuba, and it found that a new report from the National Academy of Science Committee has found that directed microwave radiation is the likely cause of illness among American diplomats in Cuba and China. The study, commissioned by the State Department and released Saturday, is the latest attempt to find a cause for the mysterious illness that started to emerge in late 2016 among U.S. personnel in Havana. The study found that directed pulse radio frequency energy appears to be the most plausible explanation for symptoms that included intense head pressure, dizziness, and cognitive difficulties. I found the explanation was more likely than other previously considered causes, such as tropical diseases or psychological issues. The study did not name a source for the energy and did not say that it came as a result of an attack. Though it did note that previous research on this type of injury was done in the former Soviet Union. They're just baiting the Q-tards in, right? Like, why would they give them that article? But I mean, it's probably true that they do have the ability. And if you do some Google searches on the voice of God, you get not literally talking about it, but it's a military weapon to put thoughts inside people's heads. It's insanity. The weapons that they're testing are real, and they're going to be used for population control. But you need to not consent. You need to remove yourself from the system. And you can take it literal or figurative, but the mark of the beast is going to be it's about submission, right? Submitting to the beast. How far are you going to go? Are you going to take this vaccine when they come and send it to you? I bet you Sash will. And it's why the moon conversation really does come back to a level of importance, right? Because Richard Nixon stepped down to prevent himself from being removed from office. And none of his political enemies, none of the Democrats since released it. None of them have used it on any Republican who's increased funding. None of them, they all know, like, this lie is perpetrated to our children, to our young scientists, to our old scientists in many cases, and they don't care. And they know there's other lies in science that they're doing the same thing. They don't want you educated. They don't want you sharp. Educate your children. Love your neighbors. Love your family. Have empathy. Remember, there are some things that are true in parts of AOC's tweets, as insane as that is to believe. All right, guys, this has been an hour-long good morning from Vietnam. Enjoy the rest of your morning. Sorry I was a little rambly, but I was all alone. I had to talk for an hour straight, and sometimes you just need to say words with your mouth. But I hope you've enjoyed the show. Have a wonderful day.